Feeling alone, misunderstood, or left out. It's timeless. Walking down the street as the only black person, feeling like a stranger in the village, and being asked, "What are you doing here?" As if you can just erase history. As if centuries of the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism didn't permanently warp our identities. That history is trapped in me. It stripped away our original tongues, taught us to look at our dark skin with skepticism, and forced us to navigate a world built on our erasure. It has shaped my family for generations. It has shaped me, and it has made me exactly who I am. So, hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. And today I'm going to be talking about A Stranger in the Village by James Baldwin, an essay that he wrote in 1953 when he visited a Swiss village called Lokaberg. In this village, he was the only black person, and this village had never encountered a black person before. So he was literally a stranger in the village. He and people of color, all of us, we are a stranger in a village of the Western civilization. That's just how it works, right? And he goes on to explain how they were obviously ignorant about who he was. They were ignorant about the state of his sense of self. For example, they initially used the N word, which was not used with the animosity that white Americans had used it in the past. They also began, after a while, they began to question his identity and the state of his mind, whether he was truly human. All those things came into play because they had never met a black person before, and their culture was what he described as, I think I would say, inherently discriminatory to anyone that's darker skinned, because they obviously associate dark skin or darkness with the devil. So seeing someone who is just darker than they are is just something they couldn't bear. Obviously, we can make that comparison to like other African cultures and how blacks react when whites visit. There's more warmth and curiosity rather than this animosity that they looked at him with. But that's just a topic for another day. Today is just discussing what it means to be a stranger in the village of the global village that we exist in and the Western world, because whether or not we like it, our society is westernized. It is strongly influenced by Western culture. Colonization happened, and a lot of African countries, a lot of Asian countries are influenced, even their legal systems, every single thing down from every area is influenced by Western culture. So we as people of color, a lot of the time we are using Western culture because that is what the ideal is. We are trying to be part of this system that is praised ever so often. A lot of the times as well, we were viewed as a stain in this system, because Baldwin says in his essay, he says that white people now have to embrace, and not necessarily embrace, but they have to deal with the fact that people that they once categorized as cattle, which is black people who they treated as slaves, are now part of their system, and they just have to see us. We're always going to be that stain in the system. And for Baldwin, he believes that that is the biggest form of rebellious act that we can take, loving ourselves and continuing to push in this system. That is the biggest form of rebellion that we can take upon ourselves, because we have been taught to hate ourselves. We have been taught that Western civilization and the Western way is the way that we should go. So to choose to embrace our own cultures, to choose to embrace ourselves, our identities, our hair, our languages, that is just the biggest form of rebellion. And that is just us existing in this village. And on top of this village that we exist in as well, James Baldwin says that history is trapped in us and that we are trapped in it. And this just resonated with me, because the truth of the matter is that trauma is passed down from generation to generation. The trauma of slavery is passed down from generation to generation to generation. The trauma of colonization is passed down from generation to generation. Whether it's hatred of your language, of your hair, all those things are passed down from generation to generation. And to then look at a black person or a person of color today and to look into their eyes and tell them that all of that doesn't matter, that our history is not trapped in them, and to tell them that they shouldn't ask for equality, to tell them that to tell them that all of that doesn't matter, that it's just history, it's the past, despite the fact that it's passed down from generation to generation and continues to affect them. Obviously, there's a healing that must take place to kind of move on from the past, but that history that's trapped in us is not something that we can just dismiss, because it dictates our world today. I mean, what systems around the world are dictated by this history. For example, one example that I love to use is this passport thing, whereby by possessing a specific nationality, by being born in a specific part of the world, being a certain color, you are automatically the prototype of humanity. You're given passports that allow you to cross borders. Meanwhile, other people are limited in how they can travel the world. There's just this privilege that you are born with if you're born in Europe versus if you're born in Africa. And all of this is as a result of history. So to then say that that history doesn't exist, which is something a lot of people try to do when people are trying to ask for equality, all these conversations is just, that is just sad to see. But I'm going to go into the idea of the epistemic contract and a structural amnesia, which is something that a lot of white people also claim. And it's very important to understand that this concept is built upon Charles W. Mills's concept of the epistemic contract and the white ignorance. So in the epistemic contract, Charles W. Mills says that there is a lack of information and it's a militant, aggressive, structural ignorance to protect white supremacy. That by being born white, you already signed this contract whereby you're given certain privileges and you just act as though you do not see that you're given that privilege, if that makes any sense. So it requires you to be blind to the racial systems that exist and that grant you your own social and economic privileges. So that's why they're civilized parts of the world. They encourage you to love your art, your culture, all of these things, while you hold a collective amnesia towards the atrocities committed against certain communities, black communities, Asian communities. All of these things are part of this epistemic contract that Charles Dove describes. And this is something that Baldwin also addresses in his essay. And this is very important because white people cannot claim ignorance anymore. Because of this history and because of the world we exist in today, everything is a globalized village. So to claim ignorance is to sign this epistemic contract that we now know exists. So when black people have this form of paranoia and this like, they can sense that there's some of microaggression or systemic challenge going on, but they're just like, okay, maybe I'm being a bit crazy. Like sometimes you have the identity crisis where you're like, what's going on? Like everyone else has this exposed to this, everyone else has this privilege while I don't, just because of where I was born or just because of this, just because of that. And all of these things matter because there's just a contract that people sign when they're born. It's an invisible contract, obviously, but it's just this epistemic contract of ignorance. And it's something that people try to just throw away. But I know it exists because, I mean, we all do it, a day-to-day pain of this. And even one example of a historical atrocity I like to give is the atrocity in Namibia, where Germany's colonial actions in Namibia against the Herero people. All these things are often ignored. And I like to also bring my personal experience into this because I said I was going through a time of identity crisis and this essay really helped me. And I realized that history is trapped in me. That was the first groundbreaking discovery, even though it seems basic, but it was the first groundbreaking discovery I made. And I see that as a Nigerian, that history manifests itself in the most like intimate ways. For example, the watering down of our native languages. A lot of Nigerians, when we speak Yoruba or Igbo, we always mix in English words into it. I know that people say it's normal, but it's because of colonization. We aren't as proud of our language, and when someone that speaks their language fluently speaks English and they have an accent, it's also something people make fun of. Rather, despite the fact that it is their identity, it's who they are. So why should they be ashamed of it? But it's just something that the world has told us to hate. So that is an example of history being trapped in us, because this history of self-hate is trapped in all of us. And then you now see Western culture praising these things in our culture and appropriating it. For example, when Chinua Achebe writes his books, when he writes Things Fall Apart, when he writes No Longer at Ease, people will read his book and say, oh wow, he's used that Igbo proverb, and you see why it's like loving it, they're enjoying it, and he's just enriching their language by feeding English language Igbo proverbs, and despite the fact that we are told not to love our language and our culture. So you can see kind of this irony and the pain that is associated with being Nigerian and this history that's trapped in us, because it's just this history of colonization and just being told that you should only speak English, you shouldn't speak Yoruba in school, you can't speak your native language in school. Because when I was home, primary school, like they would always say no vernacular, like you can't speak your language, which is just sad and just leads to people like that there's something wrong with them, something wrong with their culture, all of those things, something wrong with being dark skinned, bleaching. All these things are this understanding of this world that we live in, and the fact that we will always be a stranger in the village of the Western civilization where we just have to keep pushing, has led me to develop a double consciousness, which a lot of black people have. And this double consciousness is everything. I mean, it means that you can see how the white man or the white person views you. You have this external perspective, and you also know how you view yourself. Have that double perspective to understand that in the workplace, in the environment you're in, that people always look at you through the lens of Western civilization and the Western world is, I would say, it's liberating, because it's not then to say that, okay, I hate myself because this is how they look at me. They look at me with this look. Their culture is inherently racist to people like me. Then you hate yourself. No, that's not the lesson you learn. The lesson you learn is that you see how they view you, and your biggest act of love, your biggest act of rebellion is to love yourself however you are. Is to love your language, to love your culture, to love your hair, to love how you look. That is the biggest form of rebellious act you can take. And Baldwin himself said it. So that's just one thing I believe in. I do not believe in changing who you are because you have that double consciousness. I believe that double consciousness is important to navigate the world we live in, because as Baldwin said himself in his essay, it says that he said that understanding this, having this double consciousness and understanding how the white man views the black man tells us more about the white man than the black man. So the way the white man views the black man with hate and these things tell us a lot about the character of the white man, and we can actually use that to our advantage. And I'm going to talk about more my entire takeaway from this thing is, and I just believe that also within history, because I said history is trapped in us and we're trapped in history. History is also oftentimes written by the victors. We all know this. History nerds, everyone that's done history ever in school knows that history is written by the victors, and most oftentimes the Western world is the victor. So the history they've written is obviously to still paint themselves in a positive light. So we can't even imagine how terrible the history is, and the fact that history is supposed to be objective. History cannot be objective. History will always be subjective, because there's always emotion that goes into it. For the Western world, a lot of the time the emotion was to conquer, of hate, of disgust, of not just caring about the peoples and the groups they were destroying and invading. Meanwhile, for the people on the receiving end of this trauma, the result of these invasions and colonization has always been of pain, suffering, hate, just how they treat each other. This attitude, it's always been embedded in us now, and it's embedded in us till now. So that's just what it means for history to be trapped in us. And I just want to say that this world is white no longer, because that's what Baldwin claims in this essay. He says that the world is white no longer. Basically, essentially, we're all interconnected, whether we like it or not. Whether there's an African in Europe, whether the African is in Africa, whether there's an Asian in Asia or in Europe or whatever part of the world they exist in, like, we're all interconnected. Borders, passports, extraction of resources, minerals, all of those things are interconnected, whether illicitly or legally. Everything's interconnected, and that rather than choosing to be a victim, rather than choosing to be saddened by what is going on in the world, the biggest act of rebellion that we can take is to love ourselves and to fight against the systems around us, to keep pushing, and to understand that there's this collective amnesia, there's this collective choice to be ignorant, and to understand that is actually freedom. Because when I understood it, and when I was like, why do people view me like this? Like, because you're always questioning things at first. So you have to read something like this because it kind of opens your mind and helps you understand. So it was like, I was just having so many identity struggles during that period of my life. And it just felt liberating to read Baldwin put this into words, put how the world works into words rather. And yeah, I think that this double consciousness is important to have. I think that our world is evolving, and I just think that this essay is something everyone should read. I think everyone should read this essay. It's so enlightening, and James Baldwin is just, he just knows how, he just has his way with words. He knows how to express his ideas with such intelligence. It's just, it's beautiful to read. But those are just my thoughts on this essay and like my takeaway. Everyone's takeaway is obviously going to be different, but I just thought to share. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye for now. Now wait a minute. You've watched this video and you haven't liked and subscribed. Make sure to like, subscribe and share this video. One more thing, you've watched this video and you've enjoyed it, so don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.